Welcome, everyone, to the Let Purple Rain podcast. This is Fantasy Rain Rundown, my weekly off-season podcast show. My name is Joe Arpasi, otherwise known as Purple Rain. I started my CFF work in 2008. After stepping away for 8 years, I returned in 2024 as Purple Rain. You can find all of my content at letpurplerain.com. You can also follow the show here on YouTube and Spotify. You can really help the new Spotify channel grow by leaving a 5-star review. I'd really appreciate it. And if you want to get all the latest updates and news that I hand out, you can follow me on X at UW_purple_rain. That is REIGN. And start today's show off with a short recap of last week's content from letpurplerain.com. We'll then transition over to my topic of the day, which is my draft trends part 1. I'll be discussing various players I've been drafting, where I've been drafting them, and some of the tendencies I've been seeing in the ADP data that I've been tracking. And after that, it's going to be mailbag time, where I answer your submitted questions. So now that that's out of the way, let's dive into some college fantasy football. For this last week in review, I had posted a 2-part article series on the return to burning questions. I had written a 3-part article series in February called CFF Burning Questions for 2025. That was where I went through position by position, and I picked out different questions I thought would be key for the college fantasy football season and things to keep an eye on. Now that spring camps have been completed, I decided to circle back to some of those burning questions and review the information we now have. Last week, I covered 20 burning questions where I feel like we now have answers for those questions. Both of these articles are free to read and have absolutely no paywall at letpurplerain.com. And, if I was going to pick one out to kind of quickly highlight something here, and if there's a main takeaway, if there's anything that you could take away from these 2 articles, it would be this. It was a question that read, will the addition of Dana Holgorsen turn Dane Key into a breakout fantasy star? In my answer, I revealed that while on vacation this May, I was down at the world famous Floribama bar, and I actually ran into Dana Holgorsen. I asked him who was going to be featured as the wide receiver 1 in the offense, and he confirmed that Dane Key will be that guy. Any of you guys watching on YouTube, I've got a picture. Now I've got a picture there. A little slow on updating my graphics today. I'm recording in the morning and I'm a little tired. Got a picture of me and Dana there on the bottom at the Floribama bar, and Dane Key in a Nebraska gear there. Just kind of going over that for those of you listening here on Spotify. I'm going to transition over to our topic of the day. Once again, this is a fast-paced weekly show. I'm not going to talk on for an hour and a half to 2 hours. I'm going to keep this short and crisp. Try and keep all these shows around 30 minutes for you guys. And the main topic of today's show is my draft trends. And I really go over, I track what I do in my different CFF drafts. And what I've done now is I've ignored all the drafts that I did prior to releasing my draft guide. And now I'm retracking just based on having the draft guide information done, my player rankings, projections, etc. And right now I'm tracking these drafts in both all FBS format and Power 4 only. I've been doing a little bit more of Power 4 just because I'm prepping for the Tadpole Bowl, and that's what I've been doing my Diary of a Draft Man episodes on, so I have a little more data there. But we'll start things off with my quarterback trends. And I'm looking at all FBS drafts that I've been in. For all of you watching on YouTube here, the names and everything that I have on the screen. And this is in order by the average ADP that I've drafted players at. And I have a pretty balanced mix here. Where what I'll do real quick to make sure that our audio listeners are able to cover all of this is that I'm going to go through and read each player's name. I'm going to read what I call a draft percentage. That's what percentage of all of my FBS drafts have I taken this player. And then I'll read the ADP. The way that I like to track ADP, I just believe it's easier to view. I don't track the overall number, or at least in the way that I display it. I do technically have to track the overall number, to get this to work out. But I'll take all of the overall numbers, work out an average, and then I apply it to a round and pick. And that's what I have listed here on the screen. That's what I'll read off. So if I say the five, ADP of 5-6, that's me saying fifth round, sixth pick. I just think that's a little easier for everyone to digest. So I'm just going to kind of go down my list here. And as I mentioned, my quarterbacks are very balanced except for the top guy. Blake Horvath from Navy. I have drafted him in 100% of all of my drafts, and my average ADP for him is 5-6. My number two guy would be Haynes King. And actually, I'm going to say this. Every quarterback remaining on this list, they're all at 50% for when I've been drafting them. So I'll skip over that part to not be as repetitive here. But Haynes King, he's averaging at the 6-12 pick. Devin Dampier from Utah, averaging him at the 9-10 pick. Maverick MacGyver, I've been grabbing him around the 11-10 pick. Diego Pavia, who I really do love in drafts as a good value. I've been snagging him up around the 13-1 pick. Fernando Mendoza out of Indiana, I've been getting him at the 17-1 pick. Darian Mensah from Duke, I've been getting him at the 17-10 pick. Hunter Watson, been grabbing him around the 19-1 pick. Carson Beck, averaging from Miami, Florida, averaging at the 19-10 pick. Dwayne Coleman from Army, I've been getting him around the 20-12 pick. And then Brandon Lewis, who I'm going to tell you right now, I like him more than the last quarterback on the list, but I've been able to wait and snag him up in the late 21st round, around the 10th pick. These have been guys I've been going after, and this is literally everyone I've drafted in my all FBS drafts. I'm not leaving anybody out here, but you kind of see a trend. Around that 5-6 range, those rounds is when I tend to be going after that first quarterback. As I go down the rest of this, I have 9th round, 11th round, 13th round. So there's kind of that next spot where I'm trying to snag my quarterback twos, and then you see an obvious drop. I'm not touching the quarterback position again until the next four on the list, which are the 17th round, 17th round, a little bit of break, and then the rest of the guys, those last ones are all kind of clumped together. 19th round, 20th round, 21st round. So that also gives a little idea of kind of, and if you read my draft strategy analysis articles, I do tend to follow that overall structure where once you get into the fifth, excuse me, the 6th round, I'm giving you position recommendations, but they're in 5-round blocks. So it gives you some freedom to kind of go around, but you kind of notice I hit it not completely early. I wait until about 5 or 6, let some people go and go after the big names, and then I'm going after rushing quarterbacks I think are reliable, and Horvath and King. I'm trying to pick up and snag some guys in that 9, 11, 13th round spots. Try and pick up a guy in the 17th round. It's usually, and it doesn't surprise me, Mendoza and Mensah are the two guys I've been snagging there just because I feel like I have them ranked higher than where the consensus does, so I know I can kind of pick them up a little bit later. And then I'm trying to close out that quarterback position in rounds 19, 20, and 21. I'm going to shift over to my Power 4 drafts. Things are a little different here. One thing I do want to throw out as well, I've done 2 drafts in this mix where I did what I'm calling a boom or bust approach. If you listened last week, I was giving my Tadpole Bowl observations, and I mentioned a couple of things. The first one was, excuse me, that you need to remember that you can make pickups during the season for the Tadpole Bowl. That means that, unlike a best ball, you don't have to live and die by the players you draft. You can afford to take a swing on a guy and miss. You can still drop him. You could still pick up someone to take his spot. The fact that you can do that, I'm willing to take on more risk in those drafts for the Tadpole Bowl if you're aiming to try and win the whole thing. And if you're trying to win that whole thing, it's not about making the playoffs. It's not about having the best head-to-head record. It is about just scoring the most points. This year's champion will be determined off of who scored the most fantasy points on the entire season. So taking shots on guys that have high ceilings, I think, is really the way to go, and embracing more risk. And it also, I think, means that you're going to have to probably reach for some guys above ADP, just to guarantee that you get your guys. So that's one of these things that, when I go through my Power Four drafts, I've done a little bit. I've done two drafts like that, and the number one quarterback on my list is Demon Williams from Washington. I've never reached to get him in an all FBS draft, but with this boomer bust approach and strategy that I like for the Tadpole Bowl, I've gone after him, and he's the top guy. I grabbed him. I've drafted him 25% of the time, and I got him in the 312 pick. Next, I have Haynes King, who's one of those value guys I love. I would not probably draft him in a boomer bust approach, but I've drafted him 50% of the time at the 4-8 pick. John Mateer from Oklahoma, I've grabbed him 25% of the time as a boom bust guy at the 6-1 pick. Jaden Mayava, drafted him 25% of the time in the 7-5 pick, and he's a guy that I've reached for when I'm going for boomer bust. Ty Simpson from Alabama. This is one I really like. I've drafted him 75% of the time with my average ADP at the 8-9 pick. Diego Pavia is another one of those guys I like a bunch as a good value floor player. I've drafted him 75% of the time at the 9-10 pick. Jackson Arnold from Auburn, drafted 25% of the time and average ADP, around the 12-2 pick. Darian Mensah from Duke again makes the list, only 25% of the time for power forward drafts, and I'm drafting him around the 14-8 pick. A guy that I love, I think, is big value late in an all FBS draft, and I think I don't know how high, I don't know how low his floor will be, and I don't know how high his ceiling will be. But I really, really like Cedric Bailey, NC State. I have drafted him 75% of the time at an average of the 19-1 pick. I'll also get into it a little bit later, but one thing that I really like, and you're going to start seeing it here, actually, it starts with Mensah, but these last four quarterbacks, Mensah, Bailey, and then the last two I'm going to go over, one approach I really like for the Tadpole Bowl as well is going after stacks at quarterback and what receiver and quarterback and tight end. I think, especially in the middle to late rounds of the draft, is trying to squeeze the most fantasy value that you can out of those picks. So Bailey, I've been going after a North Carolina stack in almost every single draft late, and Bailey's typically that guy that I'm needing to get. So those potential stack guys, to rewind: Darian Mensah, Duke, getting him at 14-8. Cedric Bailey, NC State, I'm getting him at 19-1. I also have drafted Blake Shapen 25% of the time, got him at the 28 selection. And then another guy that I love for doing late round stacks with is Chandler Morris from Virginia. I have only drafted him 25% of the time. I got him at the 23-11 pick. But you can get these Virginia receivers real late. So I love the idea of taking an upside shot on Chandler Morris late in these Power 4 drafts. I'm going to switch over here to my running back draft trends. And for all FBS, I do have a lot more players here, but for the all FBS, I've drafted Bryson Washington 50% of the time at the number 1 pick. Anthony Hankerson, Oregon State, drafted him 50% of the time and average at the 2-3 pick. Ahmad Hardy, 50% of the time, 3-1 pick. Sire Gaines, Boise State, 50% of the time at the 3-10 pick. Gregory DesRosiers from Memphis, drafted 50% of the time at an average of the 4-3 pick. Dylan Smothers, a guy that I love out of NC State. I've drafted him 100% of the time at an average of the 6-5 pick. James Peoples is another guy that I love out of Ohio State. I think he's a great value. I have drafted him 100% of the time in my all FBS drafts at an average of the 9-8 spot. Jam Miller, 50% drafted at the 10-12 spot. Le'Veon Moss, drafted him 50%, averaging around the 12 pick, and he's a guy I really like for good value as well, where you can wait. Javon Ducker, Temple, drafted him 50% of the time at an average of the 14-3 spot. Travion Cooley from Troy, drafted 50% of the time at the 23 draft selection. Hayden Reed, here's a guy that I love for schedule matching. I love just him as kind of being a plug and play guy, a floor play guy, not really someone who's going to like win you your league, but he's going to plug a bunch of gaps in your lineups. I've drafted him 100% of the time at an average of the 22-6 selection. Uh, Jonathan Silver from Delaware, I've drafted him 50% of the time at the 23-1 pick. Hassan Wilson, UTEP, I've drafted him 50% of the time at the 24-12 pick. And rounding out my list, I have Rocco Griffin, UMass, drafted 50% of the time at the 25-10 pick. And looking at these average ADP numbers for my all FBS drafts, what you're kind of seeing here is I'm going, and it all depends on where that wide receiver, those first wide receiver and quarterback are going. But I only, like for the average ADP numbers, I only have one guy who made the first round, which is Bryson Washington. But I have taken Hankerson in the first round before, but like late first round and then early to mid second rounds. But these ADP numbers is, I got one guy in the first round, I got one guy in the second round, two guys in the third round, another one in the fourth round. So I'm really peppering in those first four rounds, trying to make sure that I'm getting some of these top running backs. Then I'm circling back again in the sixth, in the ninth, in the 10th, take a little break, and then I've got the 12th and 14th round. And a lot of times I want to have at least like, I would prefer to have in a 30 round best ball, all FBS draft, I'm drafting 10 running backs. I want at least five of those guys by round 10. So 1/3 through the draft, I want my top half of my running backs in there. And this ADP kind of shows that number where I'm still kind of trying to pick off a guy a little bit here and there at the 12th, 14th round. But once that's done, I'm circling back to other positions. I'm mixing in quarterbacks. I'm mixing in tight ends. I'm mixing in receivers a lot in that middle third of the draft, rounds 11 through 20. And you don't see me come back to it until round 20. And then I'm just trying to hit them up in that 20 through 25 range and then round it all out. I don't want to wait till the last five rounds for the running backs. I want to try and wrap up that group a little bit earlier. So these ADP numbers do match a lot of what I know I wrote out in my draft strategy analysis, but also how I like to be. Hit it really early, try and pick off a guy or two in the middle third, where I'm left with maybe drafting like three more guys in rounds 20 through 25. Switching over to my Power 4 drafts. I have this broken up in two graphics for those of you watching on YouTube because I've drafted a lot more guys. And things are a bit more spread out. I've done more of these drafts as well. But one thing that you're going to notice on here, especially when I get into the second graphic, one of my strategies that I am doing is once you get in the back half of your Tadpole Bowl drafts, is I'm targeting CFF coaching systems that have a history of being productive from a fantasy standpoint. And then I'm going to reach for players, but I'm just going to try and lock down the handcuff situation. Grabbing guys that are, the number one, number two, maybe a number three. I don't know if I don't think I've done that with any of these groups yet, but running back gets so so rare at the end, that back half of the draft that instead of trying to guess and hit the target just right, I'm shifting my focus to just identifying handcuff situations and trying to lock down specific running back rooms because I can drop one of those guys later and pick somebody up. So you're going to notice that a bit here. And then another thing is I'll kind of focus on just those top end guys that I think are good. My Diary of a Draft Man episode that comes out tomorrow, I kind of screwed up my bye weeks at the beginning of that draft with running back, but I'm kind of focusing on guys I really want to hang my hat on early. And what that might do then is as I'm starting to fill the back part of this running back roster, it it can be difficult with certain bye weeks. And so you may have to eliminate some guys that have bad matching bye weeks and then wait till your last pick or two to say, okay, I don't care about that anymore. But I know in the mock draft I did last night, and that's going to come out, excuse me, I did it Friday night. I'm recording here on Saturday. And that you guys are going to get to watch on Monday. Um, I think it was round 6 and 10 were the bye weeks I had to avoid, which a bunch of players I love drafting in the back half at running back. They were stuck with those, and I was having to reach. You're going to see me mention Nate Palmer. Like I reached for him in the 20th round just because I did not have a lot of options I liked. So I think that's part of my approach is I'm going to ignore ADP a bit. I get in that back half. I'm going to target these handcuff situations. I'm going to be willing to reach for ADP, try and avoid bad bye weeks, and then toward the end, I could say, whatever with the bye weeks with that last pick or two. And for those of you that might be new to my show or new to my website here, I have an article over at letpurplerain.com. Go to the Draft Central section. It is in the player spotlights, and it is called Cornering the Market. That is my handcuffs article. I have identified running back, wide receiver, and tight end handcuff rooms that have historic fantasy value, so you can use that as your cheat sheet to help you in your Tadpole Bowl drafts to know which rooms should you be targeting for a handcuff. Now that I got that spiel out of the way, let's go through these Power 4 running backs. Clear my throat a little bit there. Dylan Edwards, I've drafted 25% of the time at the 1.5 average ADP. Anthony Hankerson, Oregon State. I love the dude. I've only gotten him 25% of the time at the 111 pick. Jaheim White, West Virginia. He is one of these boomer bust guys that I like. And I include Dylan Edwards. I like him for that boomer bust approach for the Tadpole Bowl. Back to Jaheim White from West Virginia. I've drafted him 25% of the time at the 2-1 pick. Nick Singleton, Penn State, 25% of the time at the 2-8 pick. Trey Wisner from Texas, another boomer bust guy, strategy guy that I like. Drafted him 25% of the time at the 3-5 pick. Caden Durham, LSU, could be another boomer bust guy. Drafted 25% of the time at the 3-5 pick. Dylan Smothers, North Carolina State, 25% of the time at an average of the 4-1 pick. James Peoples, I mentioned I love this dude. I've gotten him 75% of the time in these Power 4 drafts and drafted him in the 6-3 pick on average. Le'Veon Moss is another guy that I said I like. And I think he's a good, actually Peoples and Moss I think could be good boomer bust strategy approach guys. But Moss from Texas A&M, I've drafted him 50% of the time at the 8-8 pick. Katron Allen, Penn State. And the next guy as well, Duke Watson from Louisville. These are both backup guys that should see significant playing time. I've drafted each of them 25% of the time, and I've gotten Allen at the 9.5 on average, Duke Watson at the 10.8. I don't want to say these are boomer bust guys, but they both have nuclear potential if the starter goes down to injury for a significant amount of time. So I do like targeting these guys for that potential. And even though they're number 2 guys, we know that they're going to be in the mix. So I'm big on drafting these guys, even though I only have them 25% of the time. Caden Fegan, Illinois, drafted 50% of the time on average at the 10-12 spot. Nate Palmer, TCU. This was a reach when I was in bye week trouble when I was drafting this last Friday. Drafted him 25% of the time at the 12-8 pick. And looking at the ADP of these numbers, it's kind of matching what we mentioned before. We got rounds 1, 2, 3, and 4. Then I'm starting to look at quarterbacks a little bit and some receivers. So you're seeing that drop to like round 6, 8, 9, 10, and a 12. So, so I'm trying to hit it early, trying to get a decent amount of guys in those first 10 rounds. And then you start to get that mix where it's like, okay, I got to focus on some other positions here because I went running back kind of heavy. But good read on how that first part goes. And going to the back half of these Power 4 running backs now. Deshaun Bishop, Tennessee, drafted 25% of the time at the 13-11 pick. Teron Stewart, Virginia Tech, drafted 25% of the time at the 13-12 pick. LJ Johnson from Cal, drafted 50% of the time at the 14-5 pick. Kirby Voorhees, this is a handcuff scenario. Drafted 50% of the time at the 15-10 pick. Kedrick Riscano, Arizona, drafted 25% of the time at the 15-12 slot. Tamarian Harden, SMU, this is a handcuff pick, 25% of the time at 16-8. Gavin Sawchuk, Florida State, handcuff pick, 25% of the time at 16-8. Freddie Brock, Oklahoma State, handcuff pick, 25% of the time at 2002. Jalen Lucas, Florida State, handcuff pick, 25% of the time at 2105. Jermaico Green, SMU, handcuff pick, 50% of the time, 2108 is my average draft position there. Jeremy Payne, TCU, handcuff pick, 25% of the time, 2305. Leo Polalski, I can never say his name right, Washington State, handcuff pick, 25% of the time, 2305. And then Oscar Attaway, the third from South Carolina State, rounds out this group, 25% of the time at 2408. I think you could view him as a handcuff pick since we don't know what's going to happen with Fawson and his appeal for an extra year of eligibility. I drafted him there as a dart throw, thinking that Fawson does not get cleared, and Attaway steps into the running back one role. And the ADP numbers looking at this, got two guys in the 13th round, one in the 14th round, two in the 15th round, two in the 16th round. So I'm kind of mixing in right around the middle point of the draft, trying to pepper in some of these guys. And then I'm waiting until I hit round 20, and I'm hitting it aggressive in round 20 and 21, and then round 23 and 24. And the guys I'm really waiting on late, anyone that went beyond round 21. In a 25-round Tadpole Bowl draft, so kind of putting that perspective. These are literally the last couple of picks. They were Jeremy Payne, TCU, Leo Pelosi, Washington State, Oscar Attaway, South Carolina. The reason I didn't grab them early is I knew I had them targeted up. I knew I wanted to go there, and they typically don't get drafted, so I waited till nearly the very end on that. Okay, I'm going to switch over since we've wrapped up our main topic here. It's mailbag time. This is the portion of the show I answer your submitted questions. You can submit questions to me on X or through the Substack chat. You can ask me questions about college fantasy football in general, movies, music, life in general, anything you want. I'm here for you guys. All of our questions today come from Kevin at Lord Overton on Substack. Excuse me, I got a bullfrog in my throat this morning. So we're going to wrap up these questions really quick. We're running about 28 minutes so far in the show. And the first question, Kevin asked, tell us about a long shot player you drafted in the last round that ended up being a major player that year. Excuse me. Apologize for everyone listening audio-wise there. Try and power my way through these couple of questions. I'm going to say that he wasn't a complete long shot, but I did draft running back Caleb Johnson from Iowa last season in round 30 of a best ball. He would hands down stand out as my biggest late round draft pick that blew up. Question number 2 from Kevin. Follow up to the first question. Tell us about the biggest busts you've drafted. I'm going to focus on last year again. These would all be sleeper busts, so they're not like a main big name guy that really busted out. But I picked these two out because I had a lot of shares of both of these guys last year. The first one, hands down, would be running back Hunter Smith from Louisiana Monroe. I was a big fan of that system. Last year, I was drafting him as like my last running back in, I think, every single draft. I was the president of the Hunter Smith fan club last summer. So, I had the right system. I just had the wrong guy with that one. And quarterback Cooper Lagasse from Tulsa. I really thought the Tulsa offense was going to take off last year, and it did not. Not at all. So those would be, I'd say, the two biggest bust guys, but they were like sleeper bust guys. The last question from Kevin here. How many golden treats do I need to have ready for the 52-man draft? I know in your question you put silver treats. You're thinking of the silver bullet. I call beers golden treats or Steve Weisers. And I call them golden treats because they're golden. And Steve Weisers, if any of you are old enough, any of you are wrestling fans, I am referring to Stone Cold Steve Austin and what they would call the beers he drank, Steve Weisers. So for this answer here, let me tell you, the draft for this league is going to be 12 rounds, but we have 52 teams that are drafting. We're not going to be doing all 12 rounds live on YouTube because it would take way too long. So we're going to do about a handful of rounds live, and then we're going to switch to a slow draft that's off of YouTube. The idea is to go about 2 to 2.5 hours live. I don't have the exact amount of rounds, probably going to be 4 or 5 rounds. Just going to see how the tempo goes. But that's kind of the plan. So when you're thinking about drinking the beers, obviously it's going to need to be for the live draft. Considering we're doing 2 to 2.5 hours, my recommendation, expert Steve Weiser, Golden Treat recommendation would be to pack at least 8 for that live draft. I don't know how fast of a drinker you are, but I have a boat. I live on a lake, and there's a motto I believe in: always pack more beers than you think you need. You'd rather come back in on the boat with extra beers in your cooler than to go back in early because you drank them all. All right, guys. So to wrap up the show here, I'm going to have a couple of announcements. Next week at letpurplerain.com, I'm going to be releasing, I've mentioned it already once, The Diary of a Draftman, Scott Fish Tadpole Bowl mock draft number 2. This will air on Monday morning, so you guys can review it before your online Tadpole Bowls start that morning. I believe the Tadpole Bowls start at 10 or 10:30 Eastern Time, and my Diary of a Draftman episode will be airing at 8 a.m. So it's perfect timing to give you guys one more mock that you can take a look at. And you heard me talk about a lot of these handcuff players and these approaches I'm doing of quarterback receiver stacks and handcuffs. You can see that play out Monday morning. Also, I'm going to be doing the over and undervalued players article. This is where I'm going to review players at every position that I view as over or undervalued based on my player rankings compared to current ADP data. Also, we mentioned the live draft for the 2025 Battle for the Belt 52-man League Challenge. That will be airing on Saturday, 7/19 at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'll be joined by Eric Froton, Jared Palmgren, and John McKechnie. Froton works, he's from NBC Sports and Fantasy Points. Jared Palmgren is from Campus to Canton, and he's the host of the Chasing the Natty podcast. And John McKechnie is from RotoWire. We're all going to be drafting our teams for this live draft, chopping it up, having a good time here for, like I said, about 2.5 hours. And I also have my CFF draft guide available. All premium subscribers get this draft guide packet for free. If you are not a premium subscriber and you do not wish to sign up to become one, I do have a link where you can go and purchase it for a one-time amount of $15. It has 76 pages of CFF info, including player rankings for all FBS. For Power 4, I do a half PPR as my normal scoring format. So I've got a regular half PPR. I have Underdog Fantasy, which those drafts have started up here. Last week they got going, and specific for the Scott Fish Tadpole Bowl, I also have Group of 5 for you degenerates out there that love doing Group of 5 only drafts. And I also provide Fantrax player upload files where you can take my player rankings and load them directly into your Fantrax leagues. I also include player projections for 974 different players. Guys, this is the next big thing in college fantasy football draft guides. I want to thank you guys here. This was the Fantasy Rain Rundown. Please follow on YouTube and Spotify. Thanks for joining the Let Purple Rain podcast. Your CFF Rain starts here.